friends, it's Unicorn, and I don't even know how we get here, but August just flew by. I actually did pretty well in reading in August. I read most of my ambitious TBR, but that's a topic for another day. And today, I want to talk about all the books that I plan to read in September. Speaking of September, I have three things in my mind. First of all is, of course, reading for the From and About Asia reading project. In September, we are gonna be reading all about East Timor, which is also called Timor-Leste. The second thing is I'm traveling to Peru in the second half of September, so I have a couple of Peruvian books that I want to read before the travel just to get a little bit of education of the culture. The third thing is a little bit of a surprise. If you watched my most recent book haul, you might be not as surprised, but I am planning to read 2 science fiction and fantasy books just because I need some escapism. It's not my genre, but I do need a good story to carry me away. And besides all of that, I still have 2 more books that I want to read without a theme in mind. And now, without further ado, let's talk about the books that I plan to read for the From and About Asia reading project for East Timor. If you didn't know, From and About Asia reading project is a long-term project that we started last May to learn and celebrate the diversity in Asian culture by reading. We take turns to read about one country and its sub-region per month, and in August we read all about Japan and East Asia, and in September we are reading about East Timor and Southeast Asia. I will link everything you may want to know about the reading project down below in the description box, as well as the invitation link for the Discord server for a more in-depth discussion. Let me tell you, it is so hard to find books from East Timor. I've only managed to find 1 book by the author who is born and raised in that country. I was lucky enough to be able to track down a affordable second copy of the book, so I'm waiting for it. And the book is The Crossing, a story of East Timor, and it's written by Luis Cardos and translated by Margaret Jull Costa. This is the memoir of the author recounting his story growing up in the Portuguese Timor, which became independent in the early 21st century. His personal story, intertwined with his homeland history, made the central image a crossing from childhood to adulthood, from colonialism to the independent. I wasn't able to find any other books by Timorese authors in either fiction and non-fiction, so I have 3 other books by authors from Western countries, if you may. So the second book I'm gonna read for East Timor is The Beloved Land by Gordon Peake. This book is a blend of narrative history, travelogue, and personal reminiscences. The author interacted with local Timorese who speak nearly 20 different languages and who are also exuberantly building their nation, which became the first new nation in the 21st century. Some review of this book says this book pays tribute to the East Timorese culture and full of insight, so I'm really looking forward to this. And then I was able to find 2 books in my library about East Timor. First one is called East Timor, A Rough Passage to Independence by James Dunn. This book is about the international commitment to East Timor and the hidden world of international diplomatic deals. It includes the stories from individuals, governments, and international bodies who pull the power together to make changes in East Timor. From the past when East Timor was ruled by the Portuguese to the Indonesian invasion and to the days when this book was published, that was 2003. The author of the book was a former Australian consul in East Timor who has published several books on the topic of East Timor, which gives him a very intriguing identity since East Timor and Australia has a very interesting and subtle relationships due to the independence of East Timor and also the Australia-East Timor spying scandal that happened in 2004. And all of that makes me super interested to see what the author have to say about East Timor around the time of the scandal, and frankly, this is one of the few books that I can borrow on this topic from my library. The last book I'm gonna read on East Timor is called The New Generation Draws a Line by Noam Chomsky. This is a short book that examines the Western power, especially NATO and America, on the land of Kosovo and East Timor. It focuses directly on the detail of both affairs and critiquing the term term of humanitarian intervention by comparing the NATO's intervention on Kosovo and the non-intervention on East Timor. NATO has been put under the spotlight again this year because of the Russia's invasion to Ukraine, and I'm curious to see what this book has to say about its history. And that's all the books that I'm gonna read on the topic of East Timor. And now I want to talk about the two books I want to read by Peruvian authors. The first is Blood of the Dawn by Claudia Salazar Jimenez, translated by Elizabeth Bryer. This is a historical fiction set in Peru during a time which is called the Time of Fear, when the Shining Path militant insurgency was at its peak. This book is a retelling of the history through the voice of women, and it's a mixture of politics, desires, fears in a lucid and brutal prose. I really look forward to read this book and to get to know Peru a little bit better. The second book I'm gonna read by Peruvian authors is called SEXOGRAPHIES by Gabriela Wiener and translated by Greaves and Jennifer Adcock. This is a rather unique book by default because of its subject matter. This is an essay collection of the author where she put herself in some extremely dangerous and difficult and unique situations. In her experiments, she experienced the feelings of immigration, maternity, fear of death, ugliness, and a lot more feelings to the fullest. These stories happened not exclusive in Peru. I believe some of them also happened in Europe. And the author of a book that I loved, Iliad Christ, really speak highly of this author. So that's one of the reasons that I picked this up. Following, I have two books from genres that I don't usually read, which is science fiction fantasy. And let's get the biggest surprise out of the way. I plan to read The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson in September. I'm not sure if I will finish it though, but I will definitely start reading the story because I just need a long story that carries me out of the reality, as far from the reality as possible. And I'm also a bit nervous because I haven't read a epic fantasy in a long time. In the book haul where I featured this book, I said that I never read a epic fantasy, which is a lie. Now I'm thinking of it because although I didn't read epic fantasy in the Western world, I read a lot of Chinese fantasy, which are all count as epic fantasy by Jin and Gulong. So I'm not a total stranger of epic fantasy, but it's definitely one of my most unfamiliar genres, and Brandon Sanderson is such a big name in the genre. Everybody loves him. Even the cashier got so excited when she saw me buying this book the other day. And on top of that, I don't know a lot about the story. I only know that it is the first book of a planned 10-book series, and Brandon Sanderson is very good at writing on a schedule, so I have no worries there. But I just know that I need a long epic story because life is not good to me these days, and just please carry me away. And I also know that a couple of you guys are very curious about my thought about this book, and frankly I am too, so maybe I'll vlog about it so we can discuss. And the next book I'm gonna read is a science fiction, which is not as bizarre as me reading an epic fantasy because a lot of the stories that I like to read have science fiction parts in them. But the book I'm gonna read is Parable of the Sower by Octavia E Butler. This is a novel that was first published in 1993, and the story in this novel happened in 2025, which is like 2.5 years from us now. In this story, in 2025, the world has already descended into madness and anarchy, which is not that different from now, I think. Anyhow, the protagonist and her family lives in one of the few safe neighborhoods that was remaining in the outskirts of LA. Dad was trying to lead a few other citizens to salvage what remains of human culture. However, a fire destroyed their compound and the protagonist lost all her family members, and she has to move to other places to safety. I heard so many good things about the writing of Octavia E Butler, and I have a feeling that I'm gonna like her because a lot of people that I trust really loved and enjoyed her books. So there's only one way to find out. And I have two books that don't really fit in any particular theme, but I'm looking forward to reading them nonetheless. The first one is The Story of the Lost Child by Elena Ferrante, and it's translated by Ann Goldstein. This is the fourth and the final books in the Neapolitan novel series, and I'm so in love with this series. I'm also a little bit sad that I need to part away with it after September. I finished this third book in the series in August, and I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And what's amazing of this series is it was once a bittersweet coming-of-age story between two girls, and now it developed into this stirring narration of the turbulent time and nation. It went way beyond the friendship, although the friendship still plays a big part in the story. But it also so much to tell about the time, about the historical event, the political intrigues, and about how the nation was transforming to modernism. I just loved everything about the story, and of course I'm gonna read the fourth one. And now I'm like torn between I want to know what happened next and I don't want it to end. The last book on my TBR is a nonfiction. It's The Family Row, an American Story by Joshua Prager. This is a book that is in the book club by NPR Politics podcast, which is how I get to know this book. This is a story about a woman called Norma McCorvey, who is most known as her pseudonym Jean Rowe. Unwanted pregnancy in 1969 opened a brand new fraction in America as the US Supreme Court recognized the rights to abortion. And as we all know, the Roe v. Wade was overturned earlier this year, ended the 53 years of protection to abortion rights, and left many women in many states in America lost their rights overnight. So naturally, I'm interested in reading the book of Norma McCorvey and to learn the historical moment and the years after. The author also did a large amount of research and had some first-hand account with Norma and her family. However, I think reading a story about Roe after the Roe v. Wade was overturned will be quite difficult, so I'm mentally preparing for it. And that's all the books I plan to read in September. September is already a very busy month for me even without the trip, and now I have the trip coming up. I'm very excited but also nervous about it, but also I do plan to have at least the reading aspect of my life be great in September. So please let me know any of your thoughts about these books that I mentioned. Have you heard or read any of them? What do you plan to read in September? And thumbs up to this video if you liked it. Don't forget to say hi in the comment section down below. Until next time, happy reading, stay healthy and safe.